There is a dullness of the American mind when we take a pass on the outrageous. We automatically accept laws as written as for the greater good. At FIT, we often call out for a change on a bad law when we see it. Child support, domestic relations law is such a bad law. Morphing into more and more punitive and impossible scenarios, our families are sent reeling in the application of these laws, as you will hear on our program today. Do not prejudge yourself that all family law is good for our children until you do the investigation as we have on FIT TV. The tentacles of far-reaching law is the subject today on this program, and I have with me Dr. Carlos Rivera on my left, who was falsely imprisoned for child support, and on his left, Jamie Wagner's fiance. Okay, I'm just going to read a little bit of a connection we have here from the last program we did when you were away. I want to make the following note. This program is the one we did a few months ago. It's a second program, a following up report. The doctor was in prison for child support arrears, and we want all to hear that you stay at the taxpayer's expense. You had to stay there at our expense. But I would like you to tell the story. I would like to, Dr. Carlos to tell his own story and how it came about, and would you try to give us a little bit of an idea of how that went down?
Sure. I often tell people, prior to 6 years ago, I was just like anybody else. I had heard divorce stories, and you would listen to them, as outrageous as they all sounded. It's like, wow, that sounds terrible, I can't believe that. And I think as a society, we're jaded to divorce and divorce stories, almost like we're watching Intolerable Cruelty or Who Are the Roses. But in 2008, I joined the League of Americans That Get Divorced and became one of the 65%. And all along the way, I felt that I was naive. I had every best intention to look out for my ex-wife. We did share the greatest blessing of 4 children together, and I will always care for her as the mother of my children. Unfortunately, our marriage did not work out. No one gets married thinking it's going to dissolve. From the outset, it was one surprise after another. I made every attempt to have a divorce which would look out for the children and we could remain friends. And I quickly found myself in a position where I couldn't keep up with an agreement. So I had no knowledge that signing a marital contract would have such ramifications ever. One
quick interjection is that the audience should know that the agreement that you signed was above and beyond what you would ordinarily have to have agreed to.
Absolutely.
Okay.
What the intent then, and it still is now, is that to to have as little change as possible in my children's lives, to keep things stable, to have them acclimated to acclimate them the best you could to the parents separating and their life being so changed. So my intention at the time, and still is, to just try to make the kids' adjustment as easy as possible. And it is possible to have an easy transition. My fiance Jamie's family, her ex-husband and her work things out in the way it should be. They're friends. They could work things out for the children. They approach problems. They remain friends, and they can handle situations. I had never imagined that I would find myself in such an adversarial relationship ever. And after years of private practice, of 13 years listening to parents of children divorcing and using pawns against each other and stories that used to nauseate me, I find that my divorce is, how did this happen?
Guess what? Here I am.
Right in the middle of it.
Yeah.
And it's shocking. And we had tried very, very hard to maintain an agreement that I just couldn't keep up. When you sum total everything, it's about $15,000 per month I'm responsible for. So if you look at my income at the time of my divorce, we were living beyond our means at the time as a family. I'm responsible in my marriage contract for $185,000 of a salary that really was $190,000 at my peak. So you take the economy change, and I went to solo practice. I don't generate the same money in a given day than I did when I was a partner in a practice with 7 pediatricians and nurse practitioners. So now I'm off on my own, seeing 1/3 of the patients. At the time that my divorce was signed, the economy changed, the real estate market imploded. 6 months before I had tried to I went into solo practice, I could have received a $250,000 loan, no problems asked, because less than 0.3% of loans defaulted for established practices. When I went, the banks were in turmoil. I couldn't get a loan for $25,000 because my debt-to-income ratio was absurd. I was upside down in an overinflated home, a mortgage that I couldn't sustain.
I think, not to interject, but I think that you made a very good point, and you just kind of skimmed over it with your salary at the time. Your peak salary was $190,000. He was responsible in the divorce agreement that he agreed to for $185,000. He didn't bring home that amount of money.
Right.
He never did.
Right.
Yet the lawyers and the judge signed off on a contract obligating him to pay out more money than he ever made.
The only thing they do is they once there's a signature, they got you. So if you...
And that's exactly where he ended up in
exactly-
2012.
Right.
It's interesting because I'm often criticizing for signing the agreement that, well, you're an educated man, why do you sign? It's like, it's not my area of expertise. I don't expect anyone to walk into a pediatric practice and operate at a level of a nurse or a physician.
Yeah, don't you love it when somebody says, you're a smart guy, how come you don't know everything?
Well, that's
Exactly. Exactly.
You know?
And it is funny. And a lot of times in my personal life, I'll be like, oh, that was a day in med school that I skipped a class, and I don't know how to program this, program that. But I had signed this with every intention, and really what I thought is, I have to make this work. And it would be no different than recently I listened to an aunt tell the story of my cousin who was sick, and she ended up remortgaging her home to pay for my cousin's care. And it's an extraordinary feat, yet when you think about to save someone's life, you wouldn't think twice about remortgaging a home to save a loved one's life. So when I was divorced, I really wasn't, not that I wasn't concerned, my wholehearted effort was to make sure that the transition would be as easy for the children and even my ex-wife as possible.
You did all the right things, because everything I've heard from the program we did with Jamie before, they were clear, and the audience is clear, and the last time they saw the program, that you did everything you could do, and actually beyond, which is unfortunately what they're holding you to.
We had tried, and along the way I actually have been blessed in that when we couldn't procure a bank loan, this is when I had signed my divorce. I was out of a practice. It was grossing $2.2 million the year before. My partner then just miraculously says there's no money to pay out via the agreement. That's not binding. My agreement by signing the divorce contract was binding enough to find me incarcerated for 6 months in a medium maximum facility, which I still, having been out 2.5 weeks, I find it hard to imagine. But at the time, everything was upside down when I signed this, and I just wanted one thing settled, and let's just put our heads down and move forward, try to start the new practice. I'm fortunate to have families that I've been with for over 13 years that stick with me even through to this point. So when I couldn't get a loan during the economy that it was so bad, I actually had blue-collar people letting me borrow money to the sum of $140,000 to start a practice, which is unheard of.
It's amazing.
It really is, and to this day I get choked up when I think about it.
And $70,000 of that went straight to the divorce settlement, trying to maintain the divorce settlement.
How unfortunate that is, yeah.
But the people had believed strongly enough to make that, for that gift to me. This is people's inheritance, their children's education funds. People who couldn't, if their boiler broke down the next day, they wouldn't be able to cover bills. That would be a problem. These are the people that I was able to borrow money from, not a banking institution, not someone who had money from.
It's extraordinary.
It was. So at that point, we continued with the hope that I can make this work. We could just work hard. We can make this work. We could get the numbers, and we can go. Ultimately, I found myself in family court after my ex-wife initiated a petition for child support arrears. So all along the way, I had been struggling. And by the time I find myself in family court, I already have 7 liens against me. My practice is in bankruptcy. I have trouble paying employees.
This is in a fairly short period of time.
This is within
couple of years?
2 years.
Yeah,
so I have trouble paying my staff. They have to wait, can we pay you next week because I have to cover this bill. So we're robbing Peter to pay Paul, trying to stay afloat. And I find myself with liens and judgments against me. I was even at the point where I couldn't afford my malpractice premiums, and I was operating for months without malpractice because I couldn't afford the premiums. I'm trying to pay for child support and the necessities, the maintenance for my children. And when I find myself in court, none of this seemed to matter. I was like, if these funds were being misallocated for personal use, why as a physician would I leave myself as such a target as to operate without malpractice insurance? I think that's a clear symbol that, or signal that I didn't have the funds to sustain this
It's amazing that the signing of the document can supersede the natural reality of things. A factual reality. Signing of a document, you could claim duress in most other courts. I don't think you can claim duress. Right?
It doesn't appear so.
How about downward modification?
Well,
which is the dopey question I had to ask.
Yeah, that actually should have been a ground ball for the attorney that was representing me. Unfortunately, what had happened to me was we were confident with the amount of materials we were submitting, tax returns, personal returns, corporate returns, expense accounts, pages upon pages of documentation in support of the fact that I did have a change in circumstances which wouldn't allow me to financially meet this obligation. Even the magistrate commented on how much paperwork we were submitting. Yet what I found out after I was sentenced to 6 months was that the attorney that I hired didn't submit it into evidence. So I technically provided no proof that I had a hardship. So all that paperwork was submitted to my ex-wife's attorney to make her case, so it was given to discovery, but it was not admitted as evidence.
This is supposed to be a court of law where the scales are balanced, right?
Which is a key point that I try to make to people who I find myself in this conversation with. As a physician, I'm responsible for anything in the patient's chart, whether they had a prior test. If I order an x-ray for a child and it's read incorrectly, it's still my fault, because since I ordered the test, it's my responsibility to physically review the x-ray and make an interpretation.
As a pediatrician, I always felt that your responsibility was greater, because not only you had the interest of the children right away, but you always also had to deal with the parents who are the supervisors of the child. You have all that. It's not just a patient, it's a patient and their parents.
That's actually what makes it fun, though. Because when I was dealing with adults, I was like, God, you spent decades putting knots in your life, and then now you want me to take it out in a 20-minute office visit, and we're going to untie up all these knots in your life. Children, it's fun because...
Well, you must have a talent for it, so that's good for you.
I enjoy the children, and some of the parents could be entertaining, too.
Yeah.
But what I find that still strikes me is the contrast and responsibility. So as a physician, I believe there should be high standards for patients' care, patient safety. Any occupation that people rely on somebody for their well-being, there should be a high standard for that, whether it be a dentist, a lawyer, a doctor, bus driver, airplane pilot. We wouldn't accept nothing but the highest standard for people's safety. Yet when I find myself dealing with matrimonial lawyers, they're exempt. They're exempt from all types of responsibility. And it's almost like a fraternal brotherhood that you can't touch them.
It is.
So in my case, God forbid I make a decision that hurts a child or a child's health was affected, there's a statute of limitations that covers them until they're 21. So I theoretically can see a premature infant and be legally responsible
for 21 years.
When they're 21 years of age. Now granted, if there was something in the child's life, a decision made that affected them, I understand the statute of limitations and I agree. Yet in the legal sense, there is such a short statute of limitations that you have no time to react. And I have been searching desperately for someone to represent me for a sequence of lawyers who have mishandled my case, and to no avail.
Yeah.
You just can't find them. So that's just part of the journey.
We have a few, and we have somebody working on constitutional issues that maybe this might be a part of, but we'll talk about that in a future moment. But right now, where do you come off of where you were? Give me that experience you had when you were away. What that was like. What Jamie had to deal with. What the kids had to deal with. What happened there?
That's a loaded question. I found myself with a third firm by the time I was sentenced to 6 months, and even standing before the judge, it was interesting because I have never been in trouble with the law my entire life. I'm an Eagle Scout. I think I have 2 speeding tickets my entire life and never been in trouble. Now I find myself with a court officer standing right behind me. My hands are on a rail in front of the judge, and I have to keep my hands without any movement whatsoever, and I'm sentenced to 6 months in jail. So I was, wow, I just can't believe this.
Yeah,
And I'm standing here like I'm a threat to society. I'm handcuffed, and the only advice my lawyer gives me is just be quiet, don't, don't overact. I was like, fine, I'm more in shock.
Yeah.
I find myself in a little holding pen, shaking my head afterwards in the back of the courts. I can't believe it. And going to jail was never on my bucket list, but I did learn quite a bit while I was in there. But the experience was, it was what you would expect to be in jail. It was a horrible experience. There was a lot of embarrassment involved in it. Missed my children. I had limited access to them for other reasons, dealing with my ex-wife and I couldn't agree on a schedule where I could speak to them, so I essentially had censored phone monitoring for 3 phone calls a week, and the phone calls lasted less than 5 minutes apiece. On the outside, my world was falling apart. I had 25 years of education and practice in the community in Patchogue. Everyone knows my story, so it's mortifying. I have a dubious distinction of being a pediatrician incarcerated for child support. Like, who ever heard of such a thing? And here, I'm the guy. I'm the guy with that story. Jamie on the outside, I think in some ways had it worse than I did, because she's trying to sift through the rubble of our lives. We had a practice with thousands of people we were serving, employees who now find themselves on unemployment, social services, public health care.
That's what I meant about the tentacles when they're open. There's so many. One person, in your case, had a lot of tentacles going out that a lot of people suffered because of it.
It's far-reaching, and it's actually nauseating when you look at the numbers, because from
you not only had to suffer the fact that you were in that place, you also had to suffer the fact that you were unusually put there, meaning that the other prisoners who were in jail had some kind of idea that, well, if I do this illegal act, I'm going to go in, right? You didn't have that happen. You didn't create something that had a negative or a void that you had to, oh, well, I'm supposed to be here. That never happened. It never will happen.
That was a huge thought that I had constantly, because I'm sitting there with, actually I had a patient of mine I was incarcerated with. So I turn around and I hear Dr. Rivera, and I'm like, oh God. And I turn around, goes, remember me? He's like, yeah, I do. Good seeing you again. So it just adds to my little checklist of interesting things in my life.
That is funny.
But it wasn't. I was like, what am I doing here? Even the corrections officers who were assigned to watch over the inmates, it's like, wait, what are you doing here? I paid over $480,000 in 5 years in child support. In 4 years. Excuse me, in child support and alimony, and I'm in jail. Like, how did this happen?
That's one of my questions was, how much does a parent need? When does the greed and need separate? Because that can be, it has to be placed. Greed has to be a part of that person's. I
would love to be able to use a different word. I truly believe that the person I'm dealing with now is a person who's much different than I had been married to for 22, well, in the relationship with 22 years and married to 15. Part of the problem, I think, is that as a society, we believe in the total annihilation and destruction of one of the parties in a divorce. Right. That this person must pay, and pay dearly.
Absolutely.
It's like, does the punishment make sense? It shouldn't be punishment. This should just be a mutual agreement that we take care of the children involved. Everyone lives comfortably. If my salary is here and my ex-wife is capable of making this salary, even it out. People live comfortably. Why on earth does someone have to have a level of a lifestyle maintained at a certain level that is no longer maintainable? The economy changes. Find a mortgage broker today that's making the same type of money they were making in 2006, 2007. You can't do that. They can't sustain that lifestyle. Make it fair. Make it fair for everyone.
Okay, that's too much common sense for me, and it's too much common sense for them. We've gone to Albany many times to tell them about situations like this on different levels. There isn't any common sense to it, and unfortunately what they're doing, as I suggested in the opening, is they're impugning the family. They're creating a dysfunction in the child. I don't know what that's like for you yet at this point, because you're struggling to see them, aren't you?
That is true. If I could backtrack though for one quick thing, because when you talk about the finances, one of the things that Jamie and I discovered while I was incarcerated was that There is a business aspect to this, in that if the total of my the judgment against me would be $250,000 by the term of my 6-month sentence. So one of the things I would love to point out is that the misconception that that debt is eradicated by your serving a 6-month sentence, that is not true. That debt accumulates, and it accumulates at 9% interest. So in the state's eyes, if they have a white-collar person like myself whose penalty will amount to $250,000 in 6 months at 9% interest, that sounds great. They make close to $25,000 over 6 months. Let's make an example out of this guy, and let's get the other 60% of deadbeat dads that are out there. The truth is they're losing money because it costs $225 a day just to keep me in jail, feed me, and have me guarded by corrections officers. And then you take the collateral damage of my faculty, my staff that's unemployed, health insurance for my children, social services for my children. You now have an excess bill of about $160,000 plus. So now the state is essentially taking a $135,000 loss to take $25,000 in child support arrears from me. It makes no business sense, but the problem is one hand isn't watching what the other hand is doing. If you could take technology that's used for, say, your repeat DWI offenders with ankle bracelets to monitor them, then put those on your deadbeat dads. So people like me who couldn't prove in court that there was a hardship that we couldn't maintain, put an ankle bracelet on me. Let me continue to work and contribute to the society at less of a burden to the taxpayer.
Sense, Doc. I'm telling you.
All I do, the only thing I do anyway is I work and I go home. I'm back and forth.
Yeah.
So then put an ankle bracelet on me. It's not costing the taxpayers more money. And if there is something that the court deems it an amount that I owe, fine, I pay it while I still maintain a practice. So now you take vendors associated with my practice, patients, families.
The tentacles are showing up, sure.
Huge collateral damage, and in the end, no one benefited. I didn't see my children for 6 months. It's been 2.5 weeks since I've been released. I still haven't seen my children, for a separate issue altogether.
Yeah.
And I think my personal story, one of the reasons I made it public is not because I enjoy being the person in the story. It's humiliating. It's humiliating. I've divulged information that no one would share about themselves. But throughout my journey, I felt that I couldn't believe this was happening to me. What horrible luck. Why? Why would this happen to me? I've always tried to do good with my life. And now I see it as that this is a mission that was given to me. My life, I hope, will be an example that will say, this is how outrageous this can be. It's not just a story. It can happen to you. 6 years ago, I didn't think this was going to be me.
I can't believe how much you're supporting my effort here, and I appreciate that. Thank you. That's what I feel like I'm doing also.
I appreciate the opportunity to be here. It has to help. It has to help people in the future.
Well, we got to change the law. I mean, because the law is screwed up. That's what I mentioned in the opening. The law is not an effective, viable condition for anybody to deal with. Well, it's a terrible law, and it's just gotten worse over the years.
It's horrible, and I think part of the problem I have for myself is that I watch movies like The Rainmaker, and I think that an honest lawyer is going to come about and change the system. I don't think I'll ever be able to generate enough money to find that lawyer. But what I do think will happen is public awareness will change. We'll stop treating it like a story, or we'll stop being jaded to it like we're watching some action flick on TV.
Look how powerful the narrative of Deadbeat Dad. Look, this is the beginning of it, because that started some 20 years ago. That's what created this law 20, 30 years ago. Now it's more like 35. And that impetus of the narrative carried itself forward, so now that idea has carried itself forward. So laws followed it and just made it worse, and it's fanned out. Now it's got everybody in the tentacles.
The problem is it's a stereotype and assumption. Jamie had heard an interview while I was incarcerated regarding someone who was looking to have
a celebrity that was looking to have shared custody
of
their child, and it was on a very popular radio station, and the DJ was discussing how this father should just suck it up and pay his child support.
Yeah, right.
Just assuming that just because he wanted to share custody, it was about decreasing his child support obligation, and that's not all it's about.
The idea that you have to say that is crazy. But I completely get it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the idea that, back in the 50s, we didn't have dads that would come into the delivery room with their wives. That just was unheard of.
Sure.
Now in the 2013, if you don't have your husband come into the delivery room, well, what's wrong with your husband? Why isn't he there? Yet when we get divorced, we expect that the father should be out there doing all the work and making all the money and giving it all to the family. and they shouldn't have any time with their children.
Right, and you're putting, now
It should be
we're putting women out to
50-50.
work now, so the women have they've
Well,
reached the equality,
women's-
so they should be suffering the same penalties.
Absolutely.
How many women do you see incarcerated for being behind in child support?
Absolutely.
In my case, when I got custody of my son, and I never received a dime of child support. My then wife said, well, why don't you, how dare you not go after the money after she went after you and had you put away? I said, no, the buck stops here. We have to at some point say, all right, that's enough.
Two wrongs don't make a
What
right.
can I do to fix it? And that's what the show is about.
That's exactly it. There's nothing to be gained by
right.
incarcerating a parent. There are dads
It's
who actually
humiliating.
want to see their children.
It's
They
a
want to
money
be with their
drain.
children. Part of the reason I found myself on this journey was I wanted everything for my children to be the best it could be. No one wanted to get divorced. No one wanted to be hurt. And we certainly weren't aware of just how many people would be enveloped by a divorce. So there was never an intent to harm. But the intent was always to look out for our children above all. So I find it ironic that I'm on this path.
How are you holding up so far, Jamie? How are you done?
It's been a tough journey. I'm very, very happy and excited to have him home, but having him home has, its own can of worms that opened up yet again. Here he is. He's still not working. We're still trying to get him reestablished with malpractice insurance, to get him back out and seeing his patients, so he can, earn an income, so he can start supporting his children again. And yet he's still unable to see his children.
He's certainly going to need your support, and I hope that you both have enough connection to make it work. It's going to strain.
I think that
It's going to be a strain.
Yeah,
it's not
I
going to be a
think that
cakewalk.
Suffering tends to bring you closer, and I
Right.
think this experience certainly has.
Right, that's what he certainly needs, that's for sure. Final comment that you want to pass along. We have 1 minute left in the program. Anything you'd like to deliver?
I just
Besides the baby.
No, I get the right to delivery. I'm actually very grateful that for our privilege of being on your show. What I would thank you. What I would like to do is to help make a change, for people to realize what's going on and to change it, not for a system of annihilation, but one of just fairness. Make it fair. It shouldn't be about money. You made a comment in your last show that it's almost when people are depleted of funds that's when it ends. It shouldn't be that way. A mutual agreement should be reached. We should find, and we should have people living productive and healthy lives outside. The marriage doesn't have to be, the dissolution of a marriage doesn't have to be the end of everything.
Thank you very much, Dr.
Thank you for your time.
I'll tell you, thank you very much, Jamie. We shouldn't be about destroying things. We should be about building bridges, and the law does not do that. It destroys everything that surrounds it in favor of a protected class. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Societal and political trends are rapidly breaking down the family that once was the cornerstone of our great American culture. At FIT, we know you cannot get this information on your own, so I'll make sure that I do my best to bring it to you every week. My name is Chris DiMaggio. Thank you for watching FIT TV, and we'll see you again next week.